Hey, so do the same negative patterns keep cropping up in your relationships despite your very best efforts to stop them? Like people not listening to you, or you having to do more than your fair share of the work, or maybe just some way that your needs just never seem to get met in your relationships. Yeah, it really sucks, right? And there are a couple of different ways that we tend to come at this. We might try and get the other person to change. And if you haven't tried that, spoiler alert, doesn't really work. Or we take some action like setting boundaries or communicating better, or maybe just like stomping around the house and slamming some doors. I mean, it was worth a try, right? But maybe those things, just none of it's really changing those patterns for you. Yeah, so negative patterns that keep repeating in our lives come from the stored complex trauma called learned distress and our survival mechanism that we have to manage it, that our brain developed very early in life. And in the case of relationship issues, nearly all of them come from this big piece of learned distress that we all have, this feeling that we don't matter just for being ourselves. And when we feel deep down like we don't matter, other people tend to treat us like we don't matter. It's kind of like there's a feeling radar going on under the surface that allows them to feel that, feeling that we don't matter despite what we're saying or doing to the contrary. And then they treat us that way. And so the really frustrating thing about learned distress is that it's stored in your limbic brain, the feeling part of your brain, in a way that makes it inaccessible to your rational thinking brain, like your prefrontal cortex. And that means you can't think or act your way out of your learned distress. However, you can remove layers of learned distress. And when you tend to remove the feeling that I don't matter, what happens is this well-being that tells you that you do matter just for being yourself expands to take the place of that learned distress, and you feel more and more like you matter, and people treat you that way automatically. It's kind of cool. So let me give you a couple of examples. So I had a client who started working on I Don't Matter, and she said, yeah, but my husband and my ex-husband and his new wife, they're never going to treat me any differently. I might feel better, but that's all that's going to happen. And then she came back to her next session and she said, well, that's weird. I don't know what happened, but my ex-husband was never this nice to me, even when we were married at the beginning of our marriage. And his new wife just sent me this amazing email asking for advice about how to better deal with our special needs son. She said, these are like miracles. I can't believe it. Another example is a client that I had who his teenage daughters really struggled with math, and it was really important to him that they do well in school and at least pass math. And so he would sit with them and help them with their homework. And of course that was met, as you can guess, with a lot of teenage hostility. But he started working on I Don't Matter, and he came back to the next session and he said, well, that was weird. Last night I sat with my younger daughter and she was struggling with the math last night, but then she got it, and then she stood up and she threw her arms around me and she said, thanks, Dad, you're the best. And he said, I don't know what happened because that's never happened before. So it seems in these cases like the other person changed, right? But actually all that had changed was that my client felt more like they mattered. They didn't do or say anything differently. I asked them and they said they did not. And this is the kind of change that I have seen happen over and over again when people peel off the feeling that they don't matter. So if repeating relationship patterns are really frustrating you, I hope that you can hear that there is really a different way for them to change for the better. And sometimes people won't come with us in the I matter thing, and they'll even say something to the effect of, hey, your learned distress was a nice crutch for me. I was leaning on it. How dare you take it away? So they won't come with us, but in those cases even, you will feel more like you matter still inside, and their negative behavior towards you will have like less impact. It'll have less sting. So even in those cases, relationships do get better. So I hope this gives you some hope that some change in relationships, some really fundamental change is really possible, because I've seen it over and over again for the last 25 years. And thanks so much for joining me out here, and I will see you again next time. I hope you have a great day.